For those of you who are willing to work in Japan someday, this is today's most important part. 皆さんこんにちは and welcome to Let's Ask Shogo. If you search for topics about finding jobs in Japan, you might have heard of the word ブラック企業 before. You might have even heard some anime characters talking about them too. It means a black company. But what does the color signify? Actually, if you're going to find a job in Japan, or even start your own business and work with other companies as your clients, you must know what kind of company they are to avoid having a terrible experience. So today, as a Japanese man who has worked at 3 Japanese companies and is now running my own, I will explain the definition of what a ブラック企業 is and why there are so many that exist. Also, at the end of the video, I will explain the points to look out for if you're going to find a job in Japan to avoid working at these companies. So stay tuned till the end. However, as I always say in these videos related to working and business in Japan, please keep in mind that the situations will of course be different if you are a Japanese or from a foreign country. And even if you get confused somewhere during the middle, that's okay. I will wrap everything up again at the end of the video in today's conclusion. それでは本日も参りましょう。Let's first understand the definition of a ブラック企業. ブラック企業 was originally a net slang that was born around 2001. However, today it is officially used by the government, media, and companies that provide employment support services. Although the definition is not clearly defined by the government, these are the 5 main characteristics of a ブラック企業. 1. Long working hours. 2. Very few or hardly any days off. 3. Low salary. 4. No pay for overtime. 5. Several kinds of harassment. It may be close to a sweatshop in English, but we are not referring to just the factories, but literally any kind of group that hires people to work. Let's take a closer look at each characteristic. 1. Long working hours. Japan has laws called 労働基準法, Labor Standards Act, which are the rules that define how the employees must be treated by their companies. According to this law, an employee can basically only work 8 hours a day and 40 hours a week. And if they will work longer than this, the company must submit certain paperwork to the Labor Standards Inspection Office. Even so, a worker can only work an extra 15 hours a week, 27 hours in 2 weeks, 45 hours a month, and 360 hours a year. But please, take a look at this graph. They asked 68,000 workers in Japan about their situation of working overtime every month. Again, by the law, it is defined that an employee can only work 45 hours a month extra. But taking a look at this graph, you can see that 43.7% of people work more than 50 extra hours a month. What's horrifying is the 12.9% of people who are working more than 100 extra hours a month. If you even that out to a day per month, it would mean they are working 4.5 to 5 extra hours a day, which means if their work hours end at 6 p.m., they will work till 10:30 to 11 p.m. every day. The Ministry of Health, Labor, and Welfare defines that more than 80 hours of overtime for 2 to 6 months is the line for KAROSHI, death from overwork. It's way too scary to imagine a life like that. 2. Very few or hardly any days off. The Labor Standard Act stipulates that employers must give workers a holiday at least once a week. It is said that the average number of days off is about 120 days, including Saturdays, Sundays, national holidays, and year-end and New Year holidays. If the number of holidays is 100 days or less per year, it can be said that the company has rather few holidays. If it's less than 80 days, it's most likely to be a ブラック企業. By the way, Japan does have the paid holidays system too, but the acquisition rate was 50%, the lowest among the 30 countries in the world for 2 consecutive years. If you work at a ブラック企業, even if you ask for a paid holiday, they will most likely tell you, "Paid holiday? Do you seriously think you can have that with these crappy work results?" No, that's not a good enough reason to get a holiday. Look around yourself. No one else is asking for a paid holiday. Aren't you embarrassed? The paid holiday system is defined by law, and you don't need a good reason to receive your holidays. It's none of your boss's business in the first place. But these are some things that a lot of people share that they have been told by their bosses. And I personally have been told this too. 3. Low salary. The Ministry of Health, Labor and Welfare sets a minimum wage for each region. For example, the hourly wage in Tokyo is 1,013 yen, 964 yen in Osaka, and 909 yen in Kyoto. The lowest can be about 792 yen in some prefectures. You can take a look at this website to find out the newest number of the prefecture you're going to work at. Try calculating your hourly wage by dividing the amount of salary you earn every month by the hours you work. The law requires employers to pay workers above the minimum wage, and it is illegal if they don't. Which of course, ブラック企業 will not care at all. 4. No pay for overtime. So earlier I explained that many workers at ブラック企業 are forced to work overtime. But it gets worse. Most of these companies don't even pay for it either. In the case of overtime work, it is necessary to pay 20% or more added to the normal wages. However, of course, ブラック企業 wouldn't care for such a law and will report false work hours of their employees, make them take the work home to do it, or worse, not manage working hours at all. These are some of the excuses that they often use in order to not pay for the extra wage. Your overtime pay is already included in your basic salary. You are in the managing post, so you don't have the right to receive overtime pay. There is a system called the fixed overtime system, where the overtime pay is included in the basic salary. However, of course, there's only a few hours worth of overtime pay that's included, and it doesn't mean that the companies can make you work forever without paying you. Next, the Labor Standards Act does state persons in supervisory or administrative positions do not apply the provisions regarding working hours and holidays. So some ブラック企業 will tell you that you are a very important person to us and you belong to the managing post, using it as an excuse to not pay overtime. However, most of the time, they're just calling you a managing post, and you actually do not have the rights you deserve, like actually being involved in the management of the company, or being able to control your work hours. Let me introduce a horrifying story that I've actually heard before. My friend, who is working at a company in Osaka, told me that everyone can receive overtime pay if they ask for it, but no one does. Why? It's because their bosses threaten them that those who request to be paid for overwork will be regarded as a greedy person who is not thoughtful of others and will lose their chances for promotions and raises. But of course, there is no guarantee that everyone will be able to benefit in the future, right? I thought that this story was crazy. 5. Several kinds of harassment. This is a problem that's getting more and more attention in Japan these past few years. At a ブラック企業, it is too common for the bosses to physically and mentally abuse their workers, that they don't even notice that they are harassing anyone. These are just a few examples of well-known kinds of harassment that happens in workplaces. 1. セクハラ, sexual harassment. Asking questions about personal relationships, relentless invitations to meals and dates, and forcing sexual relations. 2. パワハラ, power harassment. Physical violence on people and things. Yelling and screaming for a long time, denying one's personality. 3. アルハラ, alcohol harassment. Forcing others to drink alcohol. Actions that lack consideration for people who cannot drink. 4. オラハラ, moral harassment. Leaving certain individuals out of the team. Ignoring someone even when they are spoken to. Slandering someone behind their back. 5. マタハラ, maternity harassment. Telling pregnant workers that they are unfair they get to leave early. Not letting them take breaks even when they're experiencing morning sicknesses. Forcing them to quit their jobs. All 5 of these are unbelievable. But I especially hate the last, maternity harassment. How terrible can you be to say and do such things to a pregnant woman? As a father of 2 children, and having watched my wife go through all the pain, I can't believe that 25.6% of pregnant women answered in a survey that they have experienced it before. Listening to my story so far, you probably thought, why doesn't everyone just not work at these companies? So next, let me introduce to you the 5 most reasonable reasons I found about why there are so many ブラック企業 that still exist today. 1. Remnants of the period of high economic growth. 2. The importance of keeping harmony. 3. Strict dismissal regulations. 4. The intensifying competition rate for regular employees. 5. Consumers demand high services and products with cheap money. 1. Remnants of the period of high economic growth. After the end of World War II, from 1954 to 1973, for about 20 years, Japan experienced a rapid economic growth of 10% per year on average. This period is called the period of high economic growth in Japan, and it was caused by technological innovation, the rapid growth of the population, and the Tokyo Olympics 1964. If you listen to the stories of the generation that experienced this period, they would tell you that it was heaven. During the period, because it was a mass consumption society, the more the companies and workers manufactured goods, the more they made profit. The employees worked hard for long hours because the companies were able to pay them an abundant amount of salary depending on how much they've worked. Guess which generation is in the management class today? Yes, the people who are young and working in the period of high economic growth are the bosses of the younger generation now. And they still believe that the way they used to work in the past is still the right way to do things. However, the period of high economic growth and mass consumption is something far in the past. And the young workers today are not paid as much as they were back in those days, but just required to work as hard. These remnants of the older generation who remember the short golden age of Japan are the first reason why there are so many ブラック企業. 2. The importance of keeping harmony. One unique culture of Japan is that we tend to put the harmony of the group over actual results. There are many reasons why, such as religions and social systems from the past. But I personally like the study that connects this to the amount of natural disasters in Japan. Japan is a country full of natural disasters, from earthquakes, tsunamis, typhoons, volcano eruptions, and landslides. For example, Japan is just 1% of land on Earth, but about 10% of all earthquakes happen near or in Japan. This created the need for everyone to be as normal as possible, to always blend in with the group and not stand out. Why? Because when a natural disaster were to happen, everyone would need to cooperate in order to survive. If you have this one person who is selfish and doesn't cooperate, he or she will put the whole group into danger. This is why the Japanese people always had their eyes out to attack and slander anyone who acted strangely and were different. Japan is an island, so if you get kicked out of the group, there's nowhere to go. This is why many people say that Japanese don't have their own opinions, or cannot say yes or no clearly. And yes, this trait still lives within us today. Even if a young worker is forced to work in a terrible environment, they might think, I don't know what my relatives would think of me if I quit. Everyone else is working in the same environment, and it'll be embarrassing for me to complain. So the fundamental national character of Japanese is the second reason why there are so many black企業. 3. Strict dismissal regulations. The regulations regarding the dismissal of a full-time employee is surprisingly quite strict. A company can't just randomly fire someone, but there are many circumstances that must be met. 1. The company must be in a situation where they cannot pay for the salaries. 2. The employee has caused trouble or has not worked for a certain period without any communication. 3. The reason for who is going to be fired is reasonable and not vague. Although this seems like a good law for the employees, not being easily fired once you get hired, it's actually having a terrible effect on the younger generations. According to the research done by the government, 8.5% of all workers in Japan, which is worth 4.65 million people, are called 社内失業者, which are people who are hired but not working and have nothing to do. This number is set to grow to 5 million in 2025. What does it mean by hired but not working? There are different situations according to the company, but they are mainly people who are older than the 50s, who are not young enough for the companies to use them as workers, and are difficult to control because they're sometimes older than the management class. However, again, unless the company is about to go bankrupt, they cannot fire these people who they've once hired. So they are paying them their salary, but they are actually not doing anything. Guess who's going to do the actual work for them? Yes, the younger generation. They will be paid less than the older generations, but will have to work more to do their jobs they can't do because they're too old or don't have motivation. So the strict law regarding dismissal regulations might seem good at first glance, but it is the third reason why there are so many ブラック企業. 4. The intensifying competition rates for full-time employees. The increasing number of non-regular workers is making the situations worse for the full-time workers too. Unlike the past, it's getting more and more common for women, especially mothers, to work to support their families. Also, Japan is an aging society, so about 27% of our population is older than 65 years old. There are many people who have retired from their main jobs they did throughout their lives, and now working part-time to earn extra money. For the companies, these non-regular workers are much easier to hire because they can fire them a lot easier than the regular workers, and because their salaries are cheaper too. So the number of open seats for a full-time employee is constantly declining. However, the number of the young who enroll in university has been increasing, and it was as high as 54.4% in 2020. After paying all the expensive education fees, your parents are not going to be happy if you graduate from a university, but can't even find a full-time job, right? So there are more people who want to be a full-time worker, but there are less seats because of the increase of the non-regular employees, making the competition rate for the full-time employees very fierce. Even if you luckily get a seat as a full-time employee, it's not going to be a happy ending. Congratulations! Welcome to our company. From today, you're going to be working 24/7 for us. If you quit, there isn't any guarantee that you'll be able to find another job as a full-time employee, is there? I think it'll be smarter to obey us. So the young fear that if they quit their company, they will not be able to find a full-time job again, which leads to be the fourth reason to the number of ブラック企業. 5. Consumers demand high services and products with cheap money. This last one is interesting because it means that the people who are suffering from the ブラック企業 might actually be supporting them unintentionally. Japanese people tend to demand high-quality services and products, regardless of the price they pay. There are people who yell at the staff at the convenience stores or cheap restaurants for bad behavior, while they are only paying a few hundred yen. For example, if you pay only $50 to stay at a hotel, you're not going to expect a super luxurious service, right? But no. In Japan, many consumers today do not consider the working environment of the service or product provider, which leads to the companies paying a low salary to their workers, but must make them work very hard to meet the needs of the people. Then lastly, let's talk about the points to look out for in order to avoid working at a ブラック企業. For those of you who are willing to work in Japan someday, this is today's most important part. These are the 5 main points that are presented by many employment support services. 1. Inexperienced people are welcome. 2. Basic salary is too high for that job. 3. Certain abstract words are used in the job description. 4. Hiring a large number of people all year round. 5. How the people who are working at the company look like. Take a look at the job information. If they largely say they welcome inexperienced people, it might sound like a merit to some workers. But in other words, it means that the company doesn't care who they hire. Next, if the salary is strangely too high for that job, you have to be cautious too. Although it might seem like a generous offer, this may imply that they're not going to pay overtime, like I explained earlier. Also, as you read the job description, watch out for words like at home, a warm atmosphere, or やりがいがある feels rewarding. The ブラック企業 don't have any actual benefits to offer to their workers. So that's why they have to use such abstract expressions to appeal themselves. As you check out the list of job informations, be careful of the ones that are there all year long. This means that they are constantly looking for more people, which means that there are many people quitting too. Lastly, it would be best if you have a chance to actually meet or see the people working at that company. Do they look healthy? How is the atmosphere? What do they say about their own company? Again, as I explained in the beginning, that these situations would probably be different for foreign workers, but I think it's still something useful that you can keep in mind. Then lastly, today's conclusion. ブラック企業 was originally a net slang born around 2001, but it's commonly used everywhere in Japan today. Some characteristics that a ブラック企業 share are 1. Long working hours. 43.7% of people in Japan work more than 50 extra hours a month, which is longer than what's regulated by the law. 2. Very few or hardly any days off. The average number of annual holidays is about 120 days, while ブラック企業 may only have about 80. 3. Low salary. The Ministry of Health, Labor and Welfare sets a minimum wage for each region, which the ブラック企業 often ignores. 4. No pay for overtime. Overtime hours must be paid 20% or more of the normal wages, while a ブラック企業 may not pay anything at all. 5. Several kinds of harassment. At a ブラック企業, it is very common for the bosses to physically and mentally abuse their workers, so they don't even notice that they are harassing anyone. Although they have terrible environments, there are still so many ブラック企業 in Japan because 1. Remnants of the period of high economic growth. There is still a belief among the management generation that working hard for long hours without asking for rewards is a virtue, which they force to the young. 2. The importance of keeping harmony. Maintaining harmony is more important than actual results in Japan, so the young tend to not speak up. 3. Strict dismissal regulations. The companies cannot easily fire their employees in their 50s or higher who don't have any jobs to do, so the younger generation must work for them with a lower salary. 4. The intensifying competition rate for regular employees. Because there are more non-regular workers like housewives and the retired elderly, there are less seats for regular employees. The students who graduate university are desperate to have these seats, and they can't quit no matter the situation because they might not be able to find another job. 5. Consumers demand high services and products with cheap money. Japanese people tend to demand high-quality services and products regardless of the price they pay, which leads the companies to pay only a low salary to their workers but must make them work very hard to meet their needs. In order to avoid working at a ブラック企業, please look out for these following points. 1. Inexperienced people are welcome. This means that they don't really care who they work with, and it may mean that they don't even treat them well. 2. Basic salary is too high for that job. The company may not pay overtime, saying they're already paying enough. 3. Certain abstract words are used in the job description. If they use abstract words like a warm atmosphere to express their workplace, it might mean that they don't have any other merits to provide. 4. Hiring a large number of people all year round. This means that there are many people quitting and are always looking for new victims. 5. How the people who are working at the company look like. Take a look at the people working at the company to see if they look healthy and okay. So that's it for today. Thank you very much for watching. If this video helped you to deepen your understanding towards working culture in Japan, please hit the like button to let me know. And my goal is to achieve 1 million subscribers by January 2023, so your help is what I need. In this channel, you can take a closer look at Japanese traditional culture, tips on traveling to Kyoto, and social problems in Japan. So learners and lovers of Japanese language and culture, be sure to subscribe to enjoy more content. If you'd like to learn more about what I've talked about today, please take a look at my sub-channel Shogo's podcast through the link in the description box. I'll be talking about my own experiences with ブラック企業. Thanks again, and I'll see you again soon. どうもありがとうございました。